Welcome to Hindsight HacKing. I'm Corey Carter.
And I'm Ron Poole.
Let's get it started.
On this podcast, we've hacked hundreds of entrepreneurs' hindsight to help you, the listener, with better foresight. Now, guys, if you want to know all about what we can do to help you focus on being you, head over to gethhm.com. Keep pushing through those ups and downs that we all will have.
We're still going to have amazing conversations with amazing people. Hindsight hacking boils down to amazing conversations with some amazing people. All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Hindsight Hacking. And today's guest is a first for us, Mr. Suresh Kondabolu. Oh, I probably just butchered that. Hopefully it's not too bad. But Suresh, he is a practicing orthopedic surgeon and currently serves as a director of strategic media and marketing for Bullet Health, a medical education technology company. Right? Like, we're going to get into this, orthobullets.com, and learn everything that Suresh is doing and, see how this translates, how this marketing translates in the online space for people in his profession. So Suresh, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. This is awesome.
Oh, we're so excited to have you and just kind of dive into everything you're doing. And another perfect example of why Corey goes first. So this is great. I don't think I can say your last name. So anyway, why don't you take a moment and tell everyone a little bit about you?
Yeah. So I grew up in, I was born in Brooklyn, grew up in Queens and Long Island. And, as Corey mentioned, I'm currently a practicing orthopedic surgeon, but I practice very part-time. I'm actually transitioning out of clinical medicine, hopefully, pretty soon. And, just to give you some context, I went into medicine for all the wrong reasons. I think people that go into medicine for the right reasons will often say something to the effect of medicine was a calling. For me, it was more of a telling. My parents told me to do it, basically. So, I grew up with immigrant parents, so this is not an uncommon story for children of immigrant parents. In my house, you were going to be one of the 3 Ds. You were going to be a doctor, a dentist, or a disappointment. And
I did not expect that answer.
No, it's so true. Speaking from immigrant parents,
right? Oh, where are your parents from?
My grandparents came through Ellis Island. They were from Greece.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, everyone in the family. I joke that I'm the least successful person in my family.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I feel like it's a pretty relatable thing for children of immigrant parents mostly, but for most people, I think the parents want the best for their kids, but in the process of doing so, there's a lot of tension and turmoil that could potentially happen there. Especially if you're living a life that's not true to you and you're doing it for other people. It's one of the top regrets of people like on their deathbed. And I now with the minimum amount that I do practice, a lot of the cases that I wind up doing are like hip fractures in old, very elderly patients, even sometimes into their 90s. And I think the oldest patient I ever operated on was over 100 years old. And, hip fractures are one of those, rare injuries where not operating on them is more risky than operating on them, or than not operating on them. So anyway, I bring that up because I hear about people's lives at that stage in their life. And there's this great book, I think she was a palliative care nurse, I believe, Bronnie Ware. It's called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And I think the first regret on there is I wish I would have lived a life that was true to myself and not one that was expected of me. So that's one that I could definitely relate to, and I feel like a lot of people can, But yeah, anyway, like I think I was very much driven by guilt early on in my life, and it's because my parents were the quintessential like rags to riches kind of a story, real American dream kind of thing. Gave my sister and I like everything. We didn't really have to struggle for much. And yeah, so I wanted to be the good stereotypical Indian son. I promised to do the spelling bees and become a doctor eventually. But you know none of my behavior really mapped to me becoming a doctor. I was always much more of a creative kid. I was really, like into music. I was a drummer and a DJ. Those D's fell under disappointment. So, didn't really have the courage to go after those things. And so, yeah, I mean, I think you can imagine my imposter syndrome was like on another level when I started medical school, and, ultimately, when I did find podcasting, later on in medical school, it was really a way for me to kind of combine all of my interests and kind of make peace with it, and ultimately led me down a path that allowed me to really pivot out of medicine. But we could talk more about that. I don't want to, yeah,
Well,
if any, yeah,
it was going to be kind of where my question was going to go, because podcasting is pretty much what Ron and I do all day, every day. We help people launch, hit the charts, monetize. Then we manage their show, and editing and creating content from their shows. And so just, it seems, just looking at orthobullets.com for anybody that's interested, you've got a tab there where you hit podcasts, and there's, it looks like you can grab any kind of whatever your topic was, whether it's about the hand or an ankle, right? Like there's different things. But plus you've been featured all over the place on Anchor as having a top podcast. So to walk us through that podcasting journey specifically, because that speaks to Ron and I specifically, and we'll love hearing about that.
Yeah. So, when I started medical school, I remember my advisory dean, which is basically like our guidance counselor in medical school. I remember her telling me, like, it's normal for you to feel like you don't belong here in your first year, even your second year. But at the end of your third year, if you're still feeling like this, then, there's a problem. And there I was at the end of my third year. I was like, what the F am I doing here? Like, I still feel like I don't belong. I feel like I, don't really like anything. And I had to make a choice on, what to do for the rest of my life, what specialty I was going to, go into. And I was really trying to figure out a way to like reverse engineer my escape route. Right. I was just like, what are my interests outside of medicine? What are the things that I'm intrinsically motivated by? And at the time, it was hip hop, comedy, and sports. But the only one of those three that had a subspecialty attached to it was sports. So I was just like, all right, I think, I can maybe make peace with this. I was like, maybe I could be like the Sanjay Gupta of ESPN. I was like, that was the thing that I was like, this like fantasy that I had. Maybe I could, go and chase that, and maybe that could be my way, out of this. But, the problem was, in order to get into orthopedics, like it was very competitive specialty. I definitely didn't have the grades or the scores. So the only kind of back route that I knew to kind of get into that field was to do research for a year and possibly get another degree. So that's what I did. I took a year out, and I got my master's of public health, and I was doing like research in a lab. But I was really worried about going back to my fourth year of medical school to, back in clinical rotations in orthopedics, not having done anything for a year. So that year, like I was like, I need to keep up with this stuff somehow. I know realistically I'm not going to really study that year. So I realized that every time I was watching ESPN, they were talking about some injury on there that I was just like, do people like actually know what they're talking about? I barely know what they're talking about. I'm in medical school.
Yeah,
maybe. Yeah, right. So I was like, maybe I'll start a blog. I mean, blogging was kind of big then. Podcasting, really hadn't hit my radar yet. This was like, maybe 2008, 2009. And so I started writing a blog about all these injuries that I was seeing on ESPN. And, it was kind of the early days of, Facebook and Twitter. I wasn't really doing it for any other reason other than to keep in touch with that material. And, all these like sports writers started following me, and people were reaching out to me, like, that really helped my fantasy lineup. I was like, what? I was like, who is reading this? Like, what? Like this. And so it was really cool, obviously. And then when I went back to my fourth year, it was back to reality. Like, things got super busy again. And I was like, this blog is going to be really difficult to maintain as much as I want to keep doing it. It takes a lot of work to do all this research and, do the writing and, all of that. But that year that I took out in the lab, that was my first real introduction into podcasting, because I had all this time while I was doing all these like experiments and stuff. Like, I wanted to use that time to, listen to something productive. And, I was listening to a ton of like Joe Rogan, at the time, and I was just like, I feel like I could do this, like, maybe without all the mushrooms, but like I feel like I might be able to pull this off. And so I talked to a friend of mine who's also really into a lot of the same things I was into. He wound up going into psychiatry, and we started this podcast called Laughs by Prescription, we called it. And it was, we talked about all sorts of stuff. I mean, our experience in med school, we were talking about, medically related things and pop culture and sports, all sorts of things. It was really fun. It was an outlet for us. And, we were still able to kind of talk about some of the sports things that kind of started off as. Didn't really, know that anybody was listening, but, we were, what little analytics that we had in those days, there were thousands of people listening to this. And we were just like, this has got to be like spam bots or something, like, there's no way, like, how is anybody even finding this? We weren't even really promoting it. But we did it for like about 2 years, and it was a lot of fun. And then we went our separate ways. He went to Alabama to do his psychiatry residency, and I was in New York doing my orthopedic residency. And then the dream kind of died. And, meanwhile, I'm in like the thick of my residency, and I'm just like, I just made a huge mistake. Ironically, sports medicine became my least favorite subspecialty of orthopedics. So I was just like, what am I going to do? Am I going to quit? Am I going to, just try to, just try to bear this and just finish? But then at a very serendipitous time, we get a message. We had a Facebook page to that podcast, the Laughs by Prescription podcast, and it was a medical student from Poland that was basically just like, hey, guys, like, I'm a huge fan. I've listened to all of your podcasts. There's like a ton of us here in our medical school here that have listened to all of your episodes, and I know you're probably super busy, but it would mean the world to us if you kept doing this. And I was floored. I call it like dream CPR. It was like, and it was the first time that I really felt the power of social media and podcasting and the internet. The fact that somebody an ocean away could feel moved enough by something that we said to reach out to us and send us a message like that. So I was just like, all right, we got to figure this out. And this was before Zoom. This was, I guess Skype was kind of a thing, but there was really no like remote podcasting solution. I was like looking for some way to do this. And I stumbled across on this app called Anchor, which we now know as, one of the I think they power more than 50% of the podcasts like in the world now. But when I joined, this was like 3 months into their launch. They were not a podcasting platform at all. I don't know if you guys were on the platform then, but it was kind of like it was really like an audio social network. It was kind of like an early Clubhouse. It was more like a audio Twitter. And you had like 2 minutes to tell a story, sing a song, tell a joke, whatever, and then people could reply in 1 minute replies. So it was almost like you were communicating in voicemails, essentially. And I was like, this isn't exactly what I, thought it was, but I really don't have much time like to do like the hour-long podcast that we were doing. Maybe 2 minutes is really all like I can realistically have the time for. So I was like, let me give this a try. And I wasn't even posting that frequently, but, I was trying to do some real storytelling on there. I was, in between cases in the operating room, like in between clinics, like I would just like record in my car. And didn't really think much of it, but then, Anchor started putting my stuff on their like editors' picks, and they were like tweeting out like stories that they liked that I was telling. And I was like, this is cool. Didn't really think much of it. Then it was my last year of my, orthopedic residency, and most people that go into orthopedics, they wind up doing a fellowship, like, joint replacement or sports medicine or, trauma or something. And I was so burnt out. I was just like, I don't know if I'm ever going to practice, orthopedics. I was looking for other opportunities. I was like looking into medical journalism fellowships, like, something, some kind of like a last ditch, like, let me try to, salvage this situation. And then in January of my last year of residency, the team at Anchor reached out to me, and they were like, we just raised our Series A, and we love the content that you've been putting out. Like, if you're interested, we would love if you come work for us. We'd basically pay you to make content, and you can help consult on the product. And I was just like, is this real? Like, and it was very serendipitous because I was, doing my training in Long Island. They were a New York City based startup. Most of these tech companies like were Silicon Valley companies. So I went out there, I met with the team, and, started making that kind of like a monthly thing. I would go over there and, talk to them about the product, about my podcast, and and I mean, at the time it wasn't even a podcast. They when they raised that first round, they were trying to build like an audio Snapchat. Snapchat was like at its peak. It was like this, popping new kid on the block, and they were just like, I think we could do this for audio. Their thesis was, short form audio is the future. Like, that's what we believe in. They partnered with, Spotify and Apple to be able to like play music. So it really was like kind of your own like digital radio show. And I was like, this is perfect for me. I was a DJ, like I had this like hip hop background. So I created this show called Medicine Remixed, which was like this very like mixtape style of podcasting almost. Like, we're using a lot of like sounds and instrumentals and, still a lot of the same roots of Laughs by Prescription. We were still doing a lot of storytelling, still doing this like pop medicine kind of a thing. And it was awesome. And we were one of their flagship, shows for a few years. And then it became very clear that, people wanted a podcasting platform. So they listened and they pivoted into podcasting. And, we were telling them, from the get-go, like, this is great, but it would be great if we had like longer form audio here. And so it was a hell of a ride. And then in 2019, Spotify, acquired them. And, here I was, like, learned a ton about, podcasting in the space and how to grow an audience and, all these things and, had these connections. I was like, how can I make this into a business? Maybe this was the answer I was looking for the entire time on how I can, salvage this, my life decisions. And so I was like, maybe I'll start an agency and, make content for other people in the healthcare space. And I reached out to OrthoBullets because they were a site and an app that I used in residency. And it's kind of like LinkedIn meets Kaplan. A lot of people use it to study for their board exams and stuff. But it's also like a community where people like share cases and ask questions and things like that. And the one thing that they didn't have on there was an audio product. They didn't have a podcast. And I always thought like, man, like we work these 100-hour weeks. And they're expecting us to study on top of this. Like, I barely have any time, but I have, these commutes, 20 minutes to and from the hospital where, that could be like prime time to like kind of, learn some of this stuff. And they didn't have anything like it. So I basically pitched this idea and, the founder was into it. He was just like, yeah, I've gotten this request before, but I don't know where to start. And I was like, lucky for you, like I have this background in orthopedics and, this background in podcasting. I'm your guy. And I took them from 0 to 5 million downloads in a little over a year. And they're one of the top science podcasts in the world, according to Apple. And started consulting a little bit on social media for them, like 20x their following. And I was like, I think I'm, pretty good at this. Obviously, I didn't go to school for any of this. But, I've learned a lot by doing it and the experiences that I had. And, at the time, he was like, can we talk about possibly like acquiring your company? And I just like laughed at him. I was just like, well, you're my only client. So I don't know. So yes, maybe like, maybe make me an offer. I didn't really know if, I was an entrepreneur or not. Like I definitely had these entrepreneurial, tendencies like, throughout my life. And, I knew I was this like creative guy and, I thought this would be a good opportunity for me to really cultivate that self-awareness to know, like, do I want to do my own thing or am I better off, like, working in a, a company like this? And basically now, like, I'm almost like podcasting full time, like, in this company. So I guess I'm more of like an entrepreneur, and I'm building out their podcast network, and helping them with social media and marketing and some of their strategic media. So yeah, I think a lot of this, kind of happened by accident, and but part of it too was just kind of following, your heart and your intuition. I heard this great definition. I think it was Brene Brown that said intuition is the intersection of what you know and how you feel. And I it really was like a culmination of those things, and I think hopefully my life is starting to head towards a direction that's more true to who I am. So yeah.
No, I think you said so many things right there. And as you were telling your story, I was like, that was his exit strategy. Like once it's in your head that you're trying to find your way out of something, and you will start seeing ways out. It might not exactly be what you think it's going to be,
Right.
but looking back, I'm sure it's been an amazing journey. And now look what you're doing. You're doing what you're passionate about. You're using your knowledge that you had, but you're able to really focus on the creative stuff that you wanted to do from the beginning.
Right.
So that's amazing. So on the journey that you were on, gosh, this is almost Corey's question, but I have to rephrase it because this Corey normally asks the hindsight question. Let's change this.
We can change it up. We can change it up one time.
No.
Take
it. When looking back, when did you
In
know?
hindsight, looking back, no.
In hindsight, looking back, no. I don't ask the question, so I don't even know how to ask it, so it's fine. No, looking back, when did you realize, hey, you know what I wanted to do is actually happening? Or did you realize it in the moment, or did you just wake up one day and go, oh my gosh, like, look at what I'm doing, this is what I wanted to do?
Yeah, I think when that first paycheck came in from Anchor, I was just like, this is wild.
That's a crazy story.
This is weird, and like this is crazy. I mean, this is the fact that somebody is paying me money to do what I want to be doing and making the stuff that I want. I mean, we had full creative control, like, and yeah, I think that was the moment that I was just like, oh my God. And then, as we started getting feedback from, listeners, and, Anchor has this like, cool option where you can like call in and leave like a voice message, and then you can, include it in your show. And the amount of people that were, non-medical people, like one of my favorite comments was just like, I'm not even interested in medicine, and for some reason I listen to you guys, like, and it's just, it was, I think it was like moments like that where I'm just like, it's happening. And, I still want to get back to that. We're still like, we have 4 seasons of Medicine Remixed. We're hoping to release a 5th season in the fall. And, it is, I think really where my heart, truly is. And, I think this job that I took, at Bullet Health, I think really is, the way I'm looking at it, is going to really help me kind of sharpen my chops, and really help build a company at that stage. And then, really kind of utilizing all of these, different, interests, and skills that I have to be able to help a company that helped me a lot. So I think that was important to me. And plus, the founder is also, a physician entrepreneur and somebody that I looked up to. So I really, want to learn. And, ultimately though, I think, I do want to take a stab at building my own thing. I always, dreamt about like, creating like the gimlet for healthcare, and like really, creating these like highly produced, podcasts, like, about medicine and things surrounding medicine. But yeah, to answer your question, I think that's really when it was. It was when I got that email, still felt like surreal. The fact that, Anchor wanted me to make content for them. And then, yeah, when that first paycheck came in, I was just like, this is wild, dude. Like, this is crazy.
So fun, so fun. So how many shows are you doing? If I counted correctly, it looks like three. But with Ortho Bullets, are you getting other podcast hosts that you're kind of having them do stuff as well? That you coordinate that? Is there any kind of being the director of that media? Is there any kind of like on the video side on top of the audio? Like what's that whole kind of play and how does that all fit in?
Yeah, so we're a pretty small team right now, super scrappy, like startup life. So we do have a video person that I work with, very very closely um, to make video content as well, and then we kind of repurpose some of that for podcasting content. But right now a lot of the podcasts that we have are just original, just podcast. They're review podcasts, so it's very technical in nature. It's adapted for that audience that's commuting and not having access to visuals. So we are producing a lot of those. We have 3 podcasts, 1 for orthopedic surgeons and 2 for medical students. So now, like that's one type of podcast, but as you guys know, there's so many different types of podcasts. So we're trying to do a few, we have a few workshopped right now for interview series and, other ones like, more related to cases that people are submitting and, more interactive in nature. So, yeah, I mean, I'm hoping by this time next year that we'll probably have at least a dozen podcasts in circulation. The 3 that we have now are daily, which is a grind, a super grind. But yeah, all of them, we're not intending to have that sort of a release schedule necessarily. But these review podcasts, we really felt like there was a need in the market for something like that. There really is no daily podcast for medical review, and I think that's something that people really wanted. So I think that has enabled us to really get an advantage in that space. But yeah, so I definitely work a ton with the video side of the company to get content out, and really it's an omni-channel strategy for pretty much any business, right? I mean, there's really only 4 ways people communicate, right? Like there's the written word, it's pictures, it's audio, it's video, and you pretty much have to play in as many of those places as you possibly can. So my job is how are we going to put the systems in place to really scale the content, bring value to a ton of people, and really make some good stuff. So
No, that's so true. We do something similar for our show as well, and we actually just went on a break, but we were daily as well, and it is a grind, right? We tell people do not do more than 1 show until you have a ton banked, because
yeah,
you will not keep up. Like even though you think you can keep up, you just won't.
yeah.
But I have to ask, as a DJ, do you make your own music now? Are you making your own music for like the other podcast shows? Like, do you mix it?
Yeah.
Stuff.
Yeah, we did. For Medicine Remixed. When we first started, we were kind of just. It was kind of like a little bit of the wild wild west. We were using completely unlicensed like popular like music
Right.
and stuff. And then Anchor was cool with it at the time. And then once they started getting a lot more attention, they were just like, yeah, if you're
Can't
gonna
do
use
that.
music, you're gonna have. So then, but then it was a blow, but it was also like a creative one, because then we were just like, all right, I guess we just have to make our own stuff now. So that's what we started doing, and then also like working with other kind of up and coming producers, and so yeah, very much so. And it was really cool. One really cool part of the whole thing was we got another a message like probably a year into Medicine Remixed from a medical student in America this time, who was also a DJ, and basically was just like, how can I be involved in this? Like, this is the coolest thing I've ever heard. Can I just like work for you like for free and do this
Oh,
too?
oh, cool.
And I was just like, yes. Like that was another moment where I was just like, this is happening. Like this is
Right.
exactly what I wanted. Like this was our version of like the bat signal, or whatever the X-Men use, like to get all of these kind of like misfits, like in medicine, that are all also super creative with all these other skills together to really make some compelling stuff. So But yeah, I think that background definitely was an important one in the direction that we wound up going in podcasting and just how we sounded and yeah. So I still love that.
So fun, so fun. All right, so also I got a serious question now. And in hindsight, in hindsight, where did your stand-up comedy profession go awry? Like, what? How come you're not doing that full time now? No, just tell us more for real on like the whole stand-up comedy. I know you've got a passion for that, hip hop, and I'm sure you bring some of that comedy to your show in with such a serious review type topic, right? Like it's with the actual medical, and topics that many of us wouldn't understand without being in school for medicine. How do you bring stand-up comedy to your show, and I assume have a little fun with it?
Yeah, what's interesting is at the end of I think our first year of medical school, like kind of similar to high school. Medical school, by the way, is very similar to high school in that there's like a lot of these cliques and it's very small, like and then there's drama, like a lot of the same elements of high school, just like like 10 years later, like 15 years later in medical school.
You pay a lot more.
But and you pay a lot more for it, like a criminal amount. And then one of the other similar things is that at the end of your first year, and I think at the end of your last year, they do these like superlatives, like kind of best dress, in like high school they had like best dress, most likely to succeed, whatever. So I got most likely to moonlight as a stand-up comedian, which I think is the medical school version of class clown. So do with that what you will, but it was cool, like to to be acknowledged for that, I guess. And I never really considered doing it because my cousin is a stand-up comedian, and I always thought that was like, oh, that's his thing, and he's had a ton of success with it. He's been on like all the late night shows. He has like a Netflix special, like and so he's like really doing it. And so I was always just like, oh, that's that's his thing. I can't do that now. But it was this thing that just kept like kind of following me around, like no matter what, even in residency, like I was the funny guy, like I was, I had these like weird niches, because like with the DJing stuff, like I was like the DJ for all these like medical events and like conferences, so I had this like weird niche like in the medical world with the DJing. But then the comedy stuff too, like is this thing that I always secretly wanted to do, but felt like I couldn't, maybe because it wasn't my identity, it was like somebody else's. But then I realized like it is my identity, it is who I am, that's how I go through life. And probably the most unsolicited feedback that I get from people is my sense of humor. So totally like bring that to the show, like a lot of the stories that I tell. And we've all heard the cliche of like laughter is the best medicine, which I'm not really sure who came up with that. Probably somebody with like not the best health insurance, I'm guessing. But like it's like broken femur, it's like yeah, it's like no, you don't need morphine, I think you need more meme, that's what you need. But
right. I love it.
But yeah, so like I definitely incorporate that a lot into like the medicine remixed and more personal podcasting stuff. And I right before the pandemic was like, finally I was just like, I'm gonna do my first open mic. Like I've done other stuff, like not technically stand up, like if I had to give talks or like speeches, like at like weddings and stuff like that, I always used it as like an opportunity to do stand up, but never formally did it. And I was going to do it right before the pandemic, and then I guess the pandemic was my excuse. And I have a ton of comedian friends that have done comedy on Zoom, and it's just not the same. I think you need that real time like feedback from I was going to say patience, but your audience, that to, see if your jokes are hitting, and, that is really the true art form. And, I guess what I do more is like sit down comedy, like on the podcast. But once I think things are starting to open up now in New York and in Connecticut. So it's definitely on my bucket list, and definitely something that I know I need to do. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I've never actually talked about that. So
It's scary. So here's advice. So I was offered to audition at the comedy club in Denver.
no way.
Yeah, and so I practiced for months, right? And I was like, oh, I'm gonna go, and the producer guy goes, just don't drive yourself, have someone drive you.
Yeah.
And I go, that's dumb. Why would someone drive me to the audition? Because their audition like is in front of like a live crowd. It's not just you know. And I know why someone should drive you because I turned around. I
Really.
I was driving and I got 2 blocks away and I was like, I can't do it, and I turned around.
It's terrifying. Like it's so easy. Like you think it's easy, like, but being in just speaking in front of people in itself is
Right.
terrifying, right? Jerry Seinfeld's got that great bit where he's talking about, like, people's number one fear is public speaking, and number two is death. He was like,
Right.
number two is death. So he was like, you would rather, be in the casket than given the eulogy, basically, like,
Right.
is how it plays out. And I get it. And to add on top of that, making people laugh, and then if they don't, and what that feeling is like. And I try to build up the courage of, by saying, like, dude, you've done, like, you've been in life and death scenarios, and you've been in like much more stressful, situations, but I don't know, there's still something about it. Like, they used to have like theaters, and they used to call operating rooms theaters because people would actually come
Yeah.
and watch you.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine doing that. Like, it's already stressful enough having people watch you do surgery, like an audience, like people like buying tickets for it. It's like the weirdest, piece of, like, medical history. But yeah, I think it's just one of these things that everybody probably feels like you have to, unless you're like a sociopath or something. Like, you're gonna feel, you're gonna feel those nerves, and it's just something that you have to do, and you have to bomb. Like, it's like a prerequisite. Like, there's no comic that's gonna tell you that they've never bombed, and that's just like, kind of good life advice too. Like, you're gonna fail over and over and over again. It's just a matter of how many times you're gonna keep showing up, like, after those failures, and just keep beating on your craft and trying it again, testing and learning. So I think there's a lot of great skills that you can get, and it's lonely. It's like it's one person up there with a microphone and nobody else. There's no team. It's just you. It's not a team sport, and, like, I think, that is tough. That's great advice, by the way, whoever told you that, because I feel like I'd be the same way. I would probably just chicken out.
Well, literally, I remember, this is hilarious. Like, I don't think I've told this part of the story. I remember standing in a parking lot with like 20 people, and I practiced, and everyone laughed. So it, I figured I would be okay, and never once did I think I would turn around.
Yeah.
So funny. All right, I've got one more, really two more quick questions. And number one is, who's your favorite stand-up comedian?
Dave Chappelle. I think it's probably the easy answer, but, like, I've been just such a fan for so long, so I think he's definitely like the living goat. But some other, like, newer guys like coming up, like, Andrew Schultz and Akash Singh, like, those, I don't know if you guys are familiar with those names, but I think all time great living legend, is Dave Chappelle for me.
Nice. Joe Coy's my favorite.
Oh, he's
for sure.
great. Oh
Yes.
man, I love his stuff.
Every time he comes to Denver, I try to make it. It's so good.
Oh man, he's so good.
All right, next one. Who is your favorite podcaster? Because the fact that you were able to see Anchor transition through that, I'm sure you listen to podcasts all over the genre. and different types. But who's that favorite podcast that you like and would recommend?
Probably the 3 or 4, like in residency especially, that really helped me on a bunch of different fronts, from the business side to life, and just really was like kind of like some of my therapy sessions were Gary Vaynerchuk's podcast, Tim Ferriss's podcast, a few others, Tom Bilyeu's Impact Theory, what is it, creative, I'm forgetting the name, Chase Jarvis's podcast. I want to call it Creative Calling, but I think that's the name of his book. But his podcast, and then Joe Rogan was probably the first one that I listened to. So that's, I guess, like my Mount Rushmore right now that I'm thinking of.
Nice.
Yeah, we had a chance to listen to Tom speak at an event, and we actually weren't sure what to expect, but he killed it. Like he did.
Oh, he's great.
Yeah, he did awesome. All right. We want to thank you so much for your time, and we appreciate you coming on the show. But how can people get involved with you? Where can they find you? How can they connect with you?
Awesome. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. This was a blast. Yeah. Talked about a lot of stuff I've never talked about before, so props to you guys.
Nice.
And as far as connecting with me, you can look me up, Suresh Kondabolu. I know it's super easy. It just rolls off the tongue, easy to say, easy to spell.
Check
but
out the notes.
yeah, I'm sure
Hopefully I spell it right on the notes.
Yeah, it's like kinda not gonna be able to say that, but but I'm sure you'll have it in the show notes, so you could look me up, like on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter and Instagram. Send me a message, or you can email me, suresh.kondabolu@orthobullets.com. And yeah, this was a real pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, Suresh, thank you so much. Definitely a blast, and we'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon, guys.
All right, Ron, our first orthopedic surgeon joined the show. First time we've got to talk, but we didn't get into surgery like I expected. So
I actually was going to ask about it, but we didn't talk about it.
Yeah, we didn't have time for it. So
Next
I assume
time, yeah.
though we've got 2 takeaways for us before we get out of here.
I do. I think one is live your life with no regrets, right? Like really, you don't want to be on your deathbed with the woulda, coulda, shouldas, because you can't do squat about it, right? You can't do anything about it then. Follow your passions. And then, you know what? It doesn't matter your age. Just start and make that choice and follow that path, because guess what? If you are following the path and you are following your passion, things will fall into place.
Yeah, and to add on to that, live true to yourself, right? Like that was one of the first pieces. But we gotta circle back to the 3Ds, right? Like,
right? It's so true.
Doctors
so
are disappointments. So I think more importantly, we gotta whoever you are, whoever you're doing things for, you can't be following the 3Ds for yourself, right? Like the most important person that you've got to be okay with is yourself. And so the only way you're not going to be a disappointment for yourself is if you go find something that you enjoy doing. If you go have some fun doing something that you can make money doing something you love, you can make money having an impact on people's lives, and then you'll avoid that disappointment, that D for yourself. And so that's what one of my favorite things I got out of that. And definitely a blast. We got to have more orthopedic surgeons on in the future, but ultimately it was a good time. So thank you everybody for watching. Thank you everybody for listening, and we will see you on the next episode.
Bye guys.
Did you know that Hindsight HacKing Media Agency, we do all things podcast from launch? If you're already doing 10,000 downloads in a week, we handle everything. All you have to do, record it and forget it.
Guys, if you're launching a podcast, get with these guys. I could not honestly hit the charts without them.
I'm not getting paid for this, but working with both of you, the professionalism and the system that you guys had to launch the podcast, you guys killed it.
We want to help the impactors create an impact by just letting you be you and not worry about all this other crazy stuff. Connect with us. All the links will be in the show notes. See you next time. Go create an impact.